Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Alright, we are continuing with Chapter 7, Thesis on God, the Illusory World, the Dream Lion. The world being an illusion, all that goes with the world must be illusory. The entire Vedantic literature should also form part of the same illusion. How can it carry any more credibility, any more importance than the rest of the illusion? What value can Vedanta claim being part of an illusory projection? Why then should one heed a part of the illusion? How could a part of the illusion pull you out of the entire illusion? Okay, so it's a pretty important objection, because what we've been saying in this last section is that the world itself is illusory. It's not fundamentally real. There is some other underlying fundamental reality, and it's projecting what we are experiencing. In much the same way that maybe you've got a virtual reality headset on. You put it on your head and you perceive an entire world. It's not the fundamental reality, it's an illusion. What that means then is that Vedanta and the ideas of Vedanta are themselves part of the illusory projection. So you have a part of the illusion telling you that it's an illusion. Why should we listen to it? The analogy that's given to answer that question is Svapna Simhavat, like a dream lion. Let's say you are in a dream, wandering around the desert, and you perhaps lie down for a rest, and then you see a lion coming towards you, and it pounces on you in the dream. What happens? You wake up out of the dream. When the lion in the dream pounces on you, it catapults you out of the dream. In the same way, the knowledge of Vedanta, yes, it is part of the illusory world. But it has this capacity, when practiced and when gained as insight, to catapult you out of the illusory world itself. So, understanding that that's the case, then Vedanta does have some value, does have some validity to it. Then what do we do? What's the action thereafter? Play your role, is the way he puts it. He says, therefore it is of prime importance that you adhere to the tenets of Vedanta and learn to live life accordingly until you apprehend the real self. Stay clear off the hallucination of the enchanting world of perception, emotion and thought. Go about in the world like an actor on the stage. The actor plays different roles, so do you, but the actor never forgets his original identity. Thus must you play your roles in life, maintaining a clear identity with the supreme self that you are. In the words of William Shakespeare, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. So he says, steer clear off the hallucination. Go about the world like an actor on the stage. So he's not saying dismiss the world. He's saying while you are in it, go about the world playing the roles that you have. You're a parent, you are a child, you are a friend, you are a worker, you are an entrepreneur, you are a citizen, you're a human being. You're a member of this club, this tribe, this affiliation. You have all of these roles that you play. Some of which it seems that you were born into, and some of which you have chosen for yourself. The point is that you have all of these characters. And we've used this analogy in the past. When you are at a dinner as a daughter-in-law, it's a very different role with a very different set of responsibilities compared to when you are at a very similar dinner as the daughter. Are you at your family's home or your partner's family. Same person, you are you. And yet in the different environment, you play a different character, you play a different role. The point that he's making here is to say, don't lose touch with the one who is playing those roles. And that you can think of as the tenets of Vedanta, one of the main tenets of Vedanta. So this word tenets, another way we can think about what a tenet is a value, and we've talked at various times through this text about values. So what is a value? For that we can turn to a definition from the 1960s. A centrally held enduring belief which guides actions and judgments across specific situations and beyond immediate goals to more ultimate end states of existence. So a value is a belief. It's a thing that you hold to be true. And what does that belief do? How does it function? What's its action in your life? Well, it guides your actions and your judgments. In specific situations that you are in, what course of study should I adopt? That's a specific situation. How should I conduct myself in this argument? That's a specific situation. It guides you beyond your immediate goals and into long-term states of existence. Everything that we do, every action we perform, is getting us towards an experience that we have projected, either knowingly or unknowingly. Everything we do is based in a belief. I've given this simple example a few times. Money brings happiness. It's a belief. I have a value for money. After that belief takes hold in me, then it guides my actions, it guides my judgments. The courses of study I adopt, where I work, the kind of people I associate with, who I might consider as a partner, etc. So he says, adhere to the tenets of Vedanta. Well, what are the tenets of Vedanta? For that, a detailed study of this body of knowledge is really necessary. But one of the key ones that rides through everything is that freedom lies in the truth. The truth about the world around us. So seek to understand the world, the facts of the thing that you are in. But it's an illusion. Alright, then what are the truths about the illusion you're in? And that can go into all sorts of fields. If you're a scientist, you want to understand the truth about, say, the origin of life or how physics works. Whatever field of interest you have, you want to know more about it. Freedom lies in the truth about how life works, the laws that govern our existence, material laws, psychological laws, spiritual laws, and fundamentally the truth about who and what you are. Who am I? Okay, you're right, I'm a daughter-in-law here, I'm a daughter over here. I have all of these different roles, but who am I? Who's the one playing them? So to follow the tenets of Vedanta means to live a life in which you are seeking the truth. And as this text has been talking about, fundamentally that means seeking the self. The point that he's making throughout this is that you are that supreme self. That is who and what you are. And that the ego, the personality that you currently have, is a character that you play. And you're on stage. This whole world is a stage. It's a staging ground for you to express your nature, your character. But just as an actor on the stage never forgets that she is the actor, he's asking us here to never forget our true identity. Right now you're playing a role, whatever it happens to be. Who's playing it? That connection back to that sense of self Or you can think of it as that connection back to the question, who am I? Who's playing this role? Who's the one at the center of the perceptions, the center of the emotions, of the thoughts, of the choices, to whom everything is delivered and from whom everything arises? Who is that? What is that? Just keeping one minor thread of awareness, that's to seek the truth. And it's not a heavy, belaboured philosophical inquiry. It's very much like the analogy we've used in the past. You go on a tourist bus and it takes you from hotel to a tourist trap, a tourist destination. And as you're filing off the bus, the tour guide says, remember, the bus leaves from here to go back to the hotel at 6 p.m. The whole day that you're at that tourist trap, at the markets, at the beach, in the mountains, at the theatre, in the museum, there's always a thread of awareness. The bus leaves at 6. You never lose it. In the same way, you're going about your business. Who am I? I am that I am. What is that I am? Just a single thread of awareness. It doesn't interfere. It doesn't get in the way. You and 3 states. The pure consciousness, self, conditioned by the gross, subtle and causal bodies, has caused the distinct personalities of the waker, dreamer and deep sleeper. The unconditioned consciousness has become the 3 states of conditioned consciousness. Human life is a continuous cycle of the waker, dreamer and deep sleeper. They are unaware of their conditioning. They believe all is well with them and find no need to set right their statuses. It is like one being under the influence of alcohol, who does not realize he has lost his personality and assumed a false one. So the example that we can use is that of light coming through a prism to help us understand this. You have pure, unconditioned light coming into a prism. It gets conditioned by that medium and it exits as the rainbow of colours. So the experience that we have in the waking state of consciousness now, in the dream state and in the deep sleep state, is that conditioned light or that conditioned consciousness. Your personality, the thing that moves, that has qualities and properties, that is conditioned consciousness. So the conditioned consciousness expresses as the waking state, and as the dream state, and as the deep sleep state. While we are in these states, we don't have the insight to see what they are. And take the example of a dream. When you're in a dream, you don't know that it's a dream. You don't know that it's the dreaming state of consciousness, and you don't know that you are occupying the position of a dreamer. That knowledge only comes to you when you've woken up into the waking state and you say, aha, that was the dream state. I was the dreamer. But now I'm back to me again. I'm my real self, the waker. So we touched on this in the last couple of classes. Vedanta says that the stamp of reality that you give to the waking state and your personality of the waker is as valid as the stamp of reality that you gave to the dreamer and the dreaming state of consciousness. So once again, just have that thought. What if this isn't real? And so that's where the analysis of the personality and the etiology of the personality is useful. If we can understand a framework of how it came about, that gives us a sort of an intellectual foothold to remember that it has come about, that it has been projected some way, how accurate it is, how much of it is truth, that's less relevant. In the sense that what we're looking at is always an approximation. It's always a rough idea. Everything that we do has an approximation element to it. But it's useful insofar as it moves us towards that freedom. The philosopher Alan Watts talks about a useful fiction. It's useful in the sense that it liberates you from your ego. But it may not be true in the absolute sense of the term. Is the dream lion real? Is there actually a lion there? No. It's not real. But it's useful insofar as it catapults you out of the dream. It's self-disappearing. And so we can create a framework of how these three states of consciousness came about and the three personalities that we go through. So the causal body is your vasanas, the dormant tendencies of the personality. So right now, certain vasanas in you are expressing. Let's say you have a vasana for ice hockey. Up until I said that word, you weren't having any thoughts about it, no feelings towards it, no desires for it, and no actions being expressed. It was completely outside of your conscious awareness. And yet, you know that you have an interest in it, you love it. So where is your love of ice hockey? It's sitting dormant. It only expresses and renders the world of ice hockey when it meets a conducive environment. So the causal body are all of the seeds of your thoughts, of your desires, your feelings and your actions, yet to express, yet to sprout. The causal body is non-expression. So when consciousness functions through the causal body only, that's when we get the state of deep sleep. There's no expression in the vasana. Consciousness striking the no expression gives us the non-expression of deep sleep and the deep sleeper. When it comes to the causal body, you can think of it as expressing up and outwards, but it can also fold back. Perhaps a better analogy of this is something like projecting an image through film or projecting sound off a compact disc. When you strike the compact disc with a laser, it bounces off and you get sound coming out of it. It's expressing. When you turn the laser off, boom, what happens? All of that sound folds back into nothing. So too with the film analogy. The film, when you project the light through it, projects the image, but it folds back again. It withdraws and there is no image. In a similar way, your vasanas project as your personality outwards. But at the same time, it can fold back and stop that expression. There is no longer any expression. There's no rendering of your personality. So the state of absence of expression is the state of deep sleep. Subtle body refers to that first expression of the vasanas, the mind and the intellect. Consciousness interacting with the subtle body projects the dream state of consciousness and the dreamer. When the vasanas express, but let's say that there is an incomplete or a partial expression of the vasanas, and you are having some thoughts, some feelings sort of firing off, you get this seemingly incoherent mess of symbols, thoughts, feelings, ideas, perceptions, emotions. And that's why when you look at your dream, they seem to be fantastical. There's no causal relationships between things. You step outside of the door of your home, walk 5 meters, and all of a sudden you're in a different country. Things don't make sense. Why? Because there's been this partial manifestation of the mind and intellect, and it gives you this strange, incoherent, mixed up experience that we call the dream. And consciousness interacting with the gross body, which is the thing you see in the mirror, projects the waking state of consciousness and the waker. When that expression of the vasanas is complete, you've got a full expression of your personality. That's when you get the coherent sense of causation. If I eat lots of food, I gain weight. If I drink too much alcohol, I get sick. If I do this, I get that. The causation is solid. So it's the full expression of your vasanas. And that's this waking state of consciousness, where we have a higher degree of conscious awareness than we do in the dream. We have greater capacities, greater cognitive capacities in the waking state than we do in the dream state. So you can think of it as non-expression, giving deep sleep, partial expression, giving the mixed up dream state of consciousness, and then full mature expression, giving the waking state of consciousness. And those are designated: causal body, subtle body, physical body. So when you are in the waking state of consciousness, it's projecting through the causal body and the subtle body and the gross body. All three are fully active. When you're in the dream state, it's causal and subtle body. And when you're in the deep sleep state, it's just causal. So you have these three states of consciousness, and arising with them, these three personalities. We often don't make this distinction that the person who is there in the dream is not the person who is here in the waking state. But a bit of an analysis shows us that they are different personalities. You can be physically different in the dream. You can be a different gender, different species. You can do things in the dream that you would never do here in the waking state. You commit a burglary or you commit a murder, and you're on the run from the police, and then you wake up and like, oh, thank God I didn't rob that bank. So you're a different person. It's a different personality. Each state only exists for that specific subject. The dream world only exists for the dreamer. The waking world only exists for the waker. There's no bleed over. They're completely compartmentalized. And yet, they are all equated in some way. We consider ourselves to have been the dreamer. In my dream last night, I burgled a bank. Did you? Technically speaking, in the dream last night, the dreamer burgled a bank. Or you had a completely dreamless sleep. It was beautiful. You wake up and you said, I had a deep dreamless sleep. How can the waker have a dreamless sleep? It can't. Waker means fully conscious perceptions, actions, emotions, thoughts. The deep sleeper never goes through perceptions, actions, emotions, and thoughts. So to attribute deep sleep to the waker doesn't make sense. And yet we do it. Why do we do it? The three different personalities are all tied together by this singular sense of I. They're all equated to I, which is why there is a sense of continuity between them. The dreaming world and the dreamer disappear as you wake up. They fade into the mist, and this new waking world resolves into your conscious awareness. Nothing from the dream experience crosses over into the waking state. The dream world and the dreamer are gone, except for the sense of I. The sense of I is there in the dream. I'm on the run from the cops. The sense of I is here in the waking state. I'm so glad I didn't burgle the bank. it not only survives the transition from dreaming into waking, it pervades both dreaming and waking, and deep sleep. How do we know that the I pervades deep sleep? Because you attribute the deep sleep to me, to I. I slept deeply. That's how we intuitively feel. We don't say there was deep sleep. The personality went through deep sleep. It doesn't feel that way to us. It feels like I went through it. So these are different identities. Again, conditioned consciousnesses. So these different states of consciousness each have associated with them a different personality, but they're not fundamentally real. They aren't the fundamental reality. And going back to the analogy of the prism, what is that fundamental reality? It's the unconditioned light. In a similar way, what is the reality of our experience? It is that unconditioned, unchanging consciousness. There's a significant difference between the states of dreaming and waking. He says it here. He says, the waker has an edge over the dreamer and the deep sleeper. The dreamer and the deep sleeper cannot conceive, much less investigate you, the origin of the three states. Only the waker is privileged with a subtle intellect to conceive beyond his conditioned state of waking, investigate you. Thus, in the waking state, the waker can aspire to shed his conditioning and reach the unconditioned you, attain self-realization. Even the waker needs to be spiritually evolved to raise the question as to who he is. Waker, dreamer, or deep sleeper. Since each swears by his particular state, which one of them is really you? There's a parable in the scripture which answers this question. In the state of waking, there is a fully formed mind and intellect, including the subtle intellect. In the dream state, you can't have this conversation with yourself around who and what I truly am. You can't conceive of a state beyond dreaming. But in the waking state, we have an edge. Especially when we look back at the dream state and compare it to what we're experiencing right now, we can suppose that maybe this isn't fundamental. Maybe this isn't the reality. Simply by comparing dreaming and waking, we can begin to investigate what is the origin of these three states and what is the origin of my personality or my personalities. And there's a parable that talks about this. So it's the parable of King Janaka. So, King Janaka was, of course, a king who dreamt one night that he was a beggar. He awoke from that dream and was able to capture the stamp of reality that it had. So it's a parable. This is very difficult for us to do because when we wake from our dreams, we immediately transfer the stamp of reality to this present moment. And everything in the dream and the dreamer is seen to be illusory. It's not real. It was just a figment of imagination. And so we immediately dismiss it and get on with our day. In this parable, King Janaka was able to capture that stamp of belief that I was a beggar. He was able to retain it. So you can imagine how frightening or disconcerting this might be, because he began to ask the question, am I a beggar who is now dreaming that I'm a king? Or am I a king who was dreaming that I was a beggar? And this question plagued him, which indicates his level of spiritual development. He went to his counselors and asked the question, and they could not give him an answer. And as the story goes, he met with sage Ashtavakra, and he posed the question to the sage, am I the beggar now dreaming the king, or am I a king who dreamed I was a beggar? And the sage Ashtavakra said to him, you are neither. Both the beggar and the king are projections. They're not fundamentally who you are. You are the self. At one time expressing as the beggar, at another time expressing as the king, at another time expressing as the deep sleeper. But you are none of these. You are their source and their origin, the self, capital S. You are you, capital Y. The three states and the three personalities are conditioned consciousness. You are the unconditioned consciousness. So the story goes that King Janaka took that advice, began to investigate that origin, and realized the self. Became a Raja Rishi, a sage king. So must you recognize your mission as a human being, to release yourself from the prison house of the waking, dream and deep sleep. Realize you are not the waker, dreamer or deep sleeper. You are the immaculate self. Recognize your essential being, attain self-realization, spiritual enlightenment. You are heir to it. And that realization, as he touched on just before, is to maintain a connection with something other than the three states. That sense of I, that sense of I am, which pervades all of your experiences, which is the core of all of your personalities. Okay, thus end of chapter 7. Final chapter, chapter 8, the reality, the infinite Brahman. The reality supporting the illusory world is Brahman, God. Brahman is the substratum of the individual and the world. The pluralistic phenomenon of things and beings is a mere superimposition, an illusory projection upon the one reality. But Brahman remains just the same, infinite, immaculate, unaffected by the projection. An invocation in the ancient Upanishadic text proclaims the infinitude of Brahman. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om. That is infinite, this is infinite. Infinite has come out of infinite. Take away infinite from infinite, what remains is infinite. So that's obviously the invocation that we've been using for all of these classes. So this word infinity, what does it mean? Okay, in the context that we're talking here, it's unbounded and undiminished. He says that is whole, this is whole. From the whole emerges. So that refers to Brahman, that underlying reality. This refers to the world. He says that the world has emerged out of Brahman, and that having done so, Brahman remains whole. It remains infinite. So when you take infinity out of infinity, what do you get? You get infinity. And the same is true mathematically. Infinite minus infinite is infinite. So that represents Brahman, this represents the world, and both are considered infinite, but in different ways. World is considered infinite in the same way that perhaps a tennis ball can be considered infinite. Stand on the surface of a tennis ball and start walking. When will you stop? Okay, there's no end to it. Where's the beginning point of your tennis ball, of a sphere? Where's the end point? It doesn't have one. Take a straight line, that's where it starts, that's where it finishes. Circle, sphere, doesn't have that start, doesn't have an end. No beginning, no end, infinite. Take a tree, plant it, you get a seed. That gives rise to a tree. Gives rise to a seed, which gives rise to a tree. Seed, tree, seed, infinitely onwards. He says that the infinite world is projected out of the infinite Brahman, but that doesn't diminish Brahman. And there's a couple of analogies he's given in the text. You take a candle, and from that candle you light another one, and another one, and another one. Infinitely many candles can be lit from that one flame. That one flame isn't diminished by sharing the flame, by sharing the light. Nothing is lost. The other example he gives in the text is cotton. You take a whole bunch of cotton and turn it into a shirt. Cotton remains as cotton. You haven't diminished it in any way. Take that shirt, tear it to shreds, remanufacture it into a pair of socks. Shirt has disappeared, socks have appeared, cotton remains. Take those socks, de-thread them, turn it into a handkerchief. Socks have gone, cotton remains. Another example I've heard given is that of a parent's love. You have one child and you have love. A second child is born. Do you have to split your love in half? Give half to first child, half to second child? Infinitely many children you have. It doesn't diminish your love for any of them. It continues to project outwards, undiminished. In a similar way, what is this world? This world is infinite. It's projected out of the Brahman, which remains unchanged, undiminished. So these are some of the tenets of Vedanta that we're talking about. Why? What's the purpose in discussing this? What this is doing is giving us an intellectual foothold again, a way of visualizing what's going on here. We can't transcend any kind of boundary until we imagine that it can be transcended. We can't transcend what he earlier called the prison house of body, mind and intellect, of the three states of consciousness, until we can visualize first of all that there is a boundary and that it may be transcended. When you're in the dream state, there's no thought of transcending the dreaming state of consciousness. So discussions like this, talking about the infinite Brahman projecting the infinite world and yet remaining undiminished, is giving us a way of objectively viewing our experience. That this is not fundamental, there is something beyond it. Reality that persists. So these illustrations serve as pointers to conceive the magnitude and magnificence of the inconceivable Brahman. Brahman is the reality that persists, that which existed in the past, exists in the present, and will exist in the future. And what exists in the present, not in the past or future, is not real. Like the states of waking, dream, and deep sleep that a human being goes through. These three states can claim a relative reality only as long as each state exists and not before or after. The ignorance of reality has released a chemistry of thoughts and desires which go to form the illusory worlds. No human being realizes he has lost cognizance of the reality and lives through these false worlds all his life. So this word real that he's talking about here exists in all periods of time, the past, the present, and the future. So what can you point to that satisfies this definition? It existed at all times in the past, it exists here now, and it will continue to exist in the future. The personality that you're sitting with right now doesn't meet that definition, because this personality only came into existence when you woke up, and it will cease to exist as you fall into the dream state. So in that sense, the waker, dreamer and deep sleeper are not real. So something is real means it exists in all periods of time, means that it's not defined by time. In the earlier chapter, chapter 2, one of the pointers towards the reality was eternal. Eternal, not defined by time, beyond it. And even the realm of physics is pointing in this direction. There's something called the Planck scale. And basically what that says is that beyond a very, very small measure of time, the concept of time ceases to be of any value. Same is true of space. The Planck length talks about the shortest possible length. Well, what's shorter than that? Okay, nothing in the realm of space-time can define or describe what is shorter than that. It's pointing towards something beyond space, beyond time, not defined by time. So if our personalities are not real, then what is? It's again this idea of getting the subtle intellect to posit something outside or beyond the current experience. It's a way of traveling via negation. What is real? Not this. Not this. Not this. Keep searching for the real. So he's been saying in these last couple of chapters that what we're experiencing is projected by a persistent fundamental reality. We are familiar with 3 states of consciousness: waking, dream, deep sleep. They are pointing towards a 4th state of consciousness, something beyond them. And the Sanskrit word turiya means literally 4th. And it refers to the state of self-realization, enlightenment, where we recognize our identity with the infinite consciousness. The consciousness. The consciousness is the substratum of the microcosm and the macrocosm. Okay, so we touched earlier on about the subtle intellect and its role in projecting something beyond this. So the Vedantic philosophy has a system of understanding that describes the microcosm and the macrocosm. Microcosm refers to the individual. So you have consciousness, which is undifferentiated, undefined, becoming an individual experiencer, expressing through the gross, subtle and causal bodies. So you have an individual waker, or dreamer, or deep sleeper. That's the microcosm. Another way to think of the microcosm is to think of the combined waker, dreamer, deep sleeper. We touched on something analogous to this at the beginning of the text. When you look at your personality, you have perceptions, you have actions, you have emotions, and you have thoughts. Broadly speaking, that's the experiences you have. So what are you? Well, I'm something which thinks and feels and perceives and acts. I am a combined actor, perceiver, feeler, thinker. You put all of those elements together, and that defines you as a single unit. In a similar way, at the moment you are a waker. Earlier you were a dreamer and a deep sleeper. So what are you as a microcosm, as an individual unit? Well, you're a combined waker, dreamer, deep sleeper. So these are two ways that we can think of the consciousness expressing in the microcosm. As a waker, or dreamer, or deep sleeper, or as the combined waker, dreamer, deep sleeper. Macrocosm envisages the consciousness expressing as the aggregate, meaning what? Think of this present moment in time and all of the beings who are awake. All of the waking beings are considered as a single unit or a single agent. Just all of the consciousnesses considered as a single whole. Think about all of the nerve endings in your body. Now you can think about just a single nerve ending and what it's doing, the part of the world it's interacting with, and the messages that it is sending back to the central brain. Or you can consider the aggregate of all of your nerve endings as a single whole. And what do you get? Well, you get your physical body, which feels to you to be one. How many bodies do you have? Just one. When you think about it, you might have billions of bodies if you think about it from the perspective of a single nerve ending. But what happens? That's not how we experience our bodies. All of the nerve endings are aggregated together and you get this single experience of a body. In a similar way, you've got all of the wakers, all of the waking beings in this world. Are they individuals? Seems to be the case, but let's envisage them as a single agent, aggregate. Same analysis we can do when it comes to the dream state. Imagine all of the beings in the dreaming state of consciousness as an aggregate, a cosmic dreamer. So too with the deep sleepers. Imagine all of the beings in deep sleep, the cosmic deep sleeper. This is the macrocosm. And just as we did when we were talking about the microcosm, we can lump all of those into a single unit. All of the waking, dreaming, and deep sleeping beings as a single expression. Consciousness expresses as that also. Why are we doing this? The world is the microcosm plus the macrocosm. You experience yourself as an individual unit. That's the microcosm. And where do you experience yourself? Where are you? Well, you are in the macrocosm. There's me, and there's everybody else, all of the other beings. Two factors. And we intuitively experience the world this way. We lump every other conscious being into the name of others, and we have me as me. Two factors, me and not me. So the world is this microcosm plus macrocosm. What have we done when we do this? We've taken a step back outside of our experience, and now we're viewing it from arm's length. Oh yeah, there's the individual me, and there's all the aggregate of others that I'm interacting with. That is the totality. So it's giving us, again, an intellectual framework or foothold to view our experiences. Takes that whole thing and says, remember, it's all conditioned consciousness. Just like a dream. The subtle intellect is then that aspect of your experience that posits something beyond the world. What is the world? The conditioned consciousness of microcosm and macrocosm. What is something beyond that? Beyond that world of waking, dream, deep sleep, beyond that world of time, space, causation. That question, that positing of something beyond or transcendent is the job of the subtle intellect. If we continue to draw our attention to that thing that is beyond the microcosm and macrocosm, then we are, if you like, deconditioning ourselves from that collapsed belief that I am this. Again, go back to the analogy of the dream state. In the dream, you have collapsed your identity down to the dreamer. There is a boundary, there is an edge to the dream, but you never see it. You never think about it because your identity has collapsed down to just the small element of the dream. Here in the waking state, there's an edge, there's a boundary to it. The Planck length, the Planck duration. What is beyond it? Asking that question and having that nagging curiosity is to pull yourself out of that conditioning, that involvement in the defined consciousness, conditioned consciousness. In other texts, he goes into this in much more detail. He says that the way to decondition is to remove desires. Our desires essentially define us and our world. When we look out into the world, one of the ways we can look at what we're seeing is we are seeing the world of our desires. In the sense that we are filtering the reality, or we are conditioning the reality to see what our desires are projecting. And so the spiritual practice is to remove desire. And that's what we covered in one of the earlier chapters. The integrated practices of devotion for the mind, knowledge for the intellect, and service for the body. As you integrate these three together, you're choosing, not based upon what is there for your personality, you're choosing to move towards that unconditioned state. As we practice, the desires reduce, mental peace increases, and we develop the capacity for concentration. Concentration then becomes concentrated itself into meditation. So I won't go into the details of meditation here, we've done it elsewhere. But in meditation, we hold the mind on a single thought to the exclusion of all other thought. That thought itself snaps, disappears. And what remains is consciousness without thoughts. Unconditioned consciousness. So he says, through sustained meditation, you reach the state of turiya, self-realization, God-realization. In that state, you merge with the pure consciousness. You cognize the supreme reality, become one with God. And that, we are told, is the mission of human life. And that's the end of the book, the end of the text. Good question. So are we born desireless? In the theory of the creation of beings, what projects us into this illusory world is our desires. So the very fact that you are born indicates that there are desires. So it's put in other ways. You may have heard of this idea that we are born into this world to learn valuable lessons, and you're on your life journey to learn what you need to learn. Well, that implies that you're born here with some sort of ignorance, something you didn't know. Vedanta puts it similarly, which is that if you're born, it means that there are desires present, and those desires demand an expression. So we've used the analogy of going to a shopping mall. Why do you appear in the shopping mall? Well, because you have desires to buy food and a new watch and all these other things. Which part of the shopping mall will you be found in? Well, you'll be found in the parts according to your desire. If you desire a new watch, you'll be found in the jewellery store. You'll be found in the watch shop. If you desire food to fill your pantry, you'll be found in the supermarket. Similar way, you're born into this world because of unfulfilled desires. Those desires constrain you, they define you. The nature of consciousness is infinite, unconstrained. And so we feel a pressure all the time. As we remove desire, we feel that greater sense of peace, freedom, until we get to that absolute state of zero desires and absolute freedom. So you can think of it this way: the desire is the conditioning. And when you, as consciousness, enliven desire, you get the experience of the limited individual being. We come into this world because of desires. We come into this world to achieve freedom. So one you can think of because of, and the other is to think of in order to. I entered into the rehabilitation clinic because of my addiction. I'm here to liberate myself from it. And again, it's a framework for understanding. We shouldn't expect that this is a perfect representation of the truth. In the same way that any scientific theory is a representation that has enough complexity and validity to do work. So too, all of these theories, these tenets of Vedanta, these useful fictions, these dream lions, they are useful enough to do work for us. They do the heavy lifting. They allow us to view our life and our experiences in a way that gives us more freedom. Fanaticism is to say this is the way that it is. Reincarnation is the truth, or whatever tenet we happen to hold on to. So it's obviously heady stuff, and it does require some repetition of thought, repetition of reflection, and however much we've grasped it, we should always remember there are deeper levels of grasping to be achieved. So whatever we have understood, hold it lightly. Yep, this is the way I've understood it for the moment. Is it true? Well, how will I know if it's true? Does it bring you greater liberation? Does it bring you greater resilience? If yes, keep moving. Keep practicing.